welcome haere mai ngā mihi nui kia koutou katoa, ko Josh Williams tōku ingoa. My day job is I'm a principal consultant with Skills Consulting Group, but as part of that, I'm very fortunate to also be the National Coordinator for the New Zealand branch of Global Apprenticeship Network here in New Zealand, which is just really getting up and running. Been doing a bit of work quietly in the background, but beginning to get a bit more out there with things just like this. So I do want to welcome you all, one and all, and particularly to our special guests today for the first of our professional learning events. As you should be able to see on my screen, there's a slide that outlines a bit of our agenda. Now, this is the first of these, and we're really keen to get your feedback afterwards. But I think we've got an outstanding lineup of speakers and just traversing some of the issues with respect to gender inclusion and participation, particularly in work-based learning and apprenticeships, which is really where GAN's modus operandi is. But just ahead of that, as we go, the idea really is that this is informal and interactive. We have 4 focus areas as GAN, and we are hoping to run these as kind of conversations at least once a year, so that along with our resources that are available for downloading at any time, there is a get-together for interested stakeholders, people who've expressed an interest in work in the area and what's going on and who's who in the zoo to get together. So that's what we're doing today, and that's the first of these. No doubt you've all been to any number of webinars during the COVID period, so this should all be no news to anybody, but please do, as people are talking and they give you that new thought or that epiphany, pop it in the chat so we can record your thought, whether it's a thought, a statement, a question, that's fine. So do please use the chat as people are talking. And we've asked our presenters, in terms of our 30-minute slots to kind of talk for about half that time, and then we hope to actually do make sure that this is a back and forth discussion. Please, just in the normal run of things, unless you're speaking, particularly if we do get more people on the call, make sure you're using that mute button. I've mentioned that we're recording this. It's totally up to you if you have your camera on or off. And finally, just enjoy. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to myself. And apologies for any of you that have seen some of this before. And given that you've made it here, some of you might know this, but I do think it's just worth really quickly going through why have we established GAN in New Zealand, and what on earth is GAN in the first place, given that that is new to New Zealand. So just super quickly, the Global Apprenticeship Network is a creature of United Nations agencies. There was a call to action at the G20, the 20 government leaders in 2013, at the sort of closing stages of the global financial crisis, but at a point where, particularly in Europe, youth unemployment was going gangbusters, certainly much, much higher than unemployment overall. And there was a real focus on pathways for youth into jobs and careers, and a recognition that on-the-job learning, apprenticeships and earn and learn pathways provide a solution for a number of those governments. But it was also conceived of very much as a private sector-led thing, that there was an increasingly important role for workplaces to be upskilling our workforces, and to do that in a way that was inclusive. So GAN was an attempt to bring together companies, big ones, employers' federations, and international not-for-profits, funding agencies, and the like, to build linkages and from systems to learn from other systems, and to share information and knowledge about how apprenticeships and work-based learning and internships and anything that has to do with learning through work can be done well, whether that's formal or informal, so connected to countries that have got qualifications frameworks, but many that don't. So that's what happened in 2013, and over the period of following years, and I think, Gary, you were number 15, weren't you, in 2018 or 2019 as GAN Australia, and then he had quite a lot to do with influencing us as New Zealand, Aotearoa New Zealand, to apply to establish GAN here in New Zealand. But I think this is a pretty useful slide for us. It's who is GAN. So I've mentioned that the founding partners were those UN agencies, so the International Labour Organisation, UN affiliated agencies, I should say, the Institute of Employers, which is the Federation of Employers Federations, where Business New Zealand is a member, the OECD, and the business wing of the OECD. It has a number of partners who are, again, some of those pan-national and international agencies that are involved in skills and training issues. Carl from World Skills New Zealand, hello. And then finally on the right, and this is actually the governing board of GAN Global, who, by the way, meet on Saturday, our time. As you can see, you've got some of the major multinationals around the table. The chair of GAN Global is the chief executive of Nestle Americas, so that covers North, South America, and the Caribbean. I'm possibly talking out of turn here. In fact, I definitely am, but a new board member will be added to the GAN on Saturday, New Zealand time. So because it hasn't happened formally yet, I'm not allowed to say who it is, but I will say that they're joining because you're worth it. That was my little joke. So yeah, so they're based there in Switzerland, where it's currently 3 a.m. There are 16 country networks, and basically we're about influencing policy and thought leadership and advocacy. But we just like the model, work-based learning apprenticeships, no matter where that's happening and who's doing it and who's organising it. If you want to do it well, that's what GAN is there for. So our own kind of why was we did want to connect New Zealand to that international advocacy and evidence around work-based learning. And actually, COVID's made that more acute. I know Bridget will agree, for us international consultants, New Zealand, they say distance isn't a thing because of Zoom, but time zones certainly are. And actually, New Zealand can feel a bit more remote because of the way that what's happened with borders around the world. So maintaining those connections and developing those local partnerships has been really important to us, connecting to global trends and developments. So what we're trying to do, and particularly through the membership offering, which is free, is when people sign up to GAN, they'll have access to a resource centre which provides some of the pre-existing evidence and knowledge base that's been developed through New Zealand-based research. For example, the Women in Trades multi-ITO program, multi-year research, but also just to be a bit of a clearinghouse. I guess I've noticed, as a lot of people have who work even in such a small country, you can find out with efforts and initiatives that things have become quite fragmented, and people are quite keen to see the list of who's working on what and who's doing what. So hopefully GAN New Zealand isn't yet another group. It's a bit of a place where you can go to find the list. I do want to just kind of finish on that final bullet though, the celebration of employers doing the right stuff. Those, again, whether it's formal credentialised NZQA training, or whether it's a large or small corporate, or just, an employer or a group of employers that are showing a great commitment to upskilling the workforce at any stage of the career, the promotion and celebration of that, that's what we really want to try and give visibility to. I guess for those of us, who are involved in the sector right now here in New Zealand, we've got a couple of kind of major things going off in the context, which again, I think are relevant to why we wanted to establish GAN in New Zealand. So, Rove, of course, is a major structural change and, is certainly attempting to be a transformative system change. But what that implies is very much a need for capability development. I mean, in the case of work-based learning and apprenticeships, responsibility for those are moving from 27 years of industry training organisations to the provider space, obviously mostly Te Pukenga, but also PTEs, also our wānanga. So in the end, what that says is, there is a lot that we want to do different, we want to do better and improve the processes and policies and systems. But there is an awful lot that we do know about what does work and what works well, particularly when it comes to engaging employers and the role of employers with respect to work-based learning. So, we think GAN can play quite a useful role or be a value-adding thing in that space, so that if there is capability happening and transfer of roles and responsibilities happening around our formal system, that, work-based learning and apprenticeships, we can be about the model. COVID-19, the future of work and youth employment, I think we all know what we mean there. I will just say that, if the last 10 years has been about Industry 4.0 and the future of work and ageing workforces and all of the things that we know we're going to need, So many of those trends have been accelerated by COVID, but in a funny way, it has brought GAN Global back to its knitting around youth. There is that particular focus there around the quote unquote lockdown generation, or the aspirations and opportunities to young people that really do need to be preserved and protected as that generation now makes their way into what's quite an uncertain working environment and a very changing one. So, you know, while lifelong learning has very much been in the bag of the Global Apprenticeship Network, that focus on what's happening for young people and their transitions from school to work is there too. So I'm not going to go through all 4 of our focus areas, but in the phase where we were establishing GAN in New Zealand, we asked a few luminaries what we ought to focus on. And this is the first of the 4 focus areas, and it is gender. And the definition there you can read on the screen. And actually, we're going to segue nicely into Kelly and Angela in this regard, because the early encouraging work and research and promotional activities certainly speaks to the effort around women in trades that went on, that was launched, you know, a couple of years ago, I think, at one of our research forums, and is now built into the, you know, and is underpinning some of that work on trades careers. But, you know, why is gender a focus area for GAN? Well, in this country, we still have a 10% gender parity pay gap, despite the fact that it's been illegal to pay women less for a similar role since 1972. To put that in perspective, I'm younger than 1972, and there's been a generation of people going through the workforce, and so clearly that law hasn't exactly been enforced. But even if we take a 10% gender pay gap, when we look at professions, the professional sector at 17%, and we look at the trades at 16%, those are first and second on the league table, that's not good enough. So we need to focus there. When it comes to apprenticeships and work-based learning, you know, I'm happy to say that 14% of New Zealand's apprentices today are female, and that's been going up about 1% a year for the last 4 years, after remaining static about 9 or 10 since forever. But of course, you unpack that statistic just one more step, and what you find is, of course, the majority of the female apprentices are participating in services and social services, which is just fine. But actually, when we look at our traditional trades, we're still languishing 2%, 3%, and clearly that's not good enough either. So GAN hopes to play a role around putting a highlight and a spotlight on the issue, and in particular, the efforts and evidence that we see that are going on that are helping to improve the situation, address the situation, and advocate for policies that do address it. Just to end on a slightly brighter note there, the new apprentices in 2018, 2019, I think, the new starts in 2019 was 18% female. So that suggests if the new entrants are higher than the overall, then the trend is positive, and it does look like now we can say that there is a positive trend in that regard. And again, that goes to a lot of great efforts, but more to do. I'm going to finish. This is just a thank you, and please join us. And if you're here, you probably already have. But please do tell your friends. And you know, there is the sign up form at GAN New Zealand. I can guarantee it will always be free to join. And what that does get you is the sort of the behind the scenes part of the website, which is about that resource centre that I've been talking about. And we'll also be doing a role in some wider stakeholder events later in the year as well. But look, that's GAN in a nutshell for those that didn't already know the GAN in a nutshell. So look, I hope that's been useful, if not kind of interesting. And as I say, in terms of that focus area, it's a really nice segue for me to stop sharing my screen and introduce, whoops, I'm going too far. How do you get out of this? Here we go. I want to introduce Angela and Kelly, who, thank you very much, Angela and Kelly, first of all, for being the first to say yes to being part of this and presenting to us on the work that's going on with trades careers that I think anybody on LinkedIn should have seen. You guys, whatever you're doing with your boosting, it's really working. It's hitting my algorithm. And we know that you've had a very successful survey phase, which we're going to hear about. Just to introduce our two speakers, I mean, Angela Mayo, her biography is the bucket list of a wonderful person. but she's actually already lived all of it. By kind of day, she's specialised in marketing and communications in a really who's who of global cities and fashion capitals. She's a social justice advocate and entrepreneur, a social change maker, a podcaster, and a Women of Influence finalist 2 years running. She, along with a friend, formed ACE Lady, a network of thousands of women to access resource and support relating to gender equity in the workplace. Kelly Bennet is BC ITO's Principal Advisor Women. And given my background in the ITO sector that goes back some way, I think that the fact that there is a job title called Principal Advisor Women at BC ITO is itself reflective of positive change. Kelly's leading the Trades Career Project on behalf of an ITO consortium, which includes the Skills Organisation. Kelly and Angela, thank you very much for being with us to explain to us about where you're at with trades careers, what's underpinned it, and what's next. And if you talk, then we'll open up the floor and let's turn this into a discussion. I'm going to have a glass of water. Thanks, guys.
Well deserved, Josh. I'll just start presenting my screen if I can. How do I go about doing that?
I think, yeah. It's really great to have the opportunity to speak with you all today, and yeah, we're excited to share what we've been up to and where we're going next. There we go.
Excellent. Okay. So so thanks so much for that great introduction, Josh, and it was fantastic to hear more about GAN. I think it really resonated with us around that that kaupapa of sharing knowledge across countries and what works and what works well, and that's been a real big driver behind the ITOs coming together to work together. So you've had a wee introduction to the two of us, and then just a little bit about what we're going to do today. So we're just going to talk through briefly the project background, and why we're doing this. We'd like to talk to you a bit about the survey design and some of the findings, talk about what we're going to do next, and then we'll open up the floor to have some questions where we can discuss some of these themes a bit further. So as Josh mentioned, it is a joint project between BCITO, Competence, Connexus and Skills. And between us, we make up the four major ITOs for the infrastructure and construction sectors. So at the end of last year, the four ITOs got together with the idea that more can be achieved collectively than it can be alone for women in this space. So each ITO had some individual initiatives, but we really wanted to come together and work more closely together. Really coming off the back of the research, Josh, that you mentioned that happened a couple of years ago, which was that initial look into the experience of women in building and construction trades. So Trade Careers is our first project together, and it's really in a response to what happened with COVID-19. So these are just some of the media snippets that you may remember in the wake of COVID, when Statistics New Zealand first published their results around women's job losses due to COVID-19. So initial numbers were that 90% of the jobs lost were by women, and the most up-to-date results were 33,000 people lost their jobs due to COVID-19, and 22,000 of those were women, and women that came from industries like retail, hospitality, and tourism. The government's economic response to COVID-19 has been a huge investment into building, construction and infrastructure, which is amazing for the industries that we represent, but it really did present a problem for women, given that these are male-dominated industries. There, again, a lot of media attention around this question and questions in the House about what was going to be the government's response to this gender divide around issue and solution, but little progress was made in this area. So what we wanted to do is really look at, oh, my presentation seems to have disappeared there. Sorry. I will try that again. Apologies. Glitchy systems here. Okay, so really wanted to look at how do we bridge that problem between how do we bridge that gap between problem and solution? So, in talking with Angela and getting together as the Women in Trades Collective, so those representatives from the 4 ITOs, we wanted to look at the question of, so our mission became to ensure the pathway to trades as a career change option for women who have lost their jobs or become underemployed as a result of COVID is as accessible as possible. So really kind of connecting that pathway. And we've been fortunate that the Tertiary Education Commission has funded this project, which has enabled us to really move at pace. So our initial problem is that we knew very little about these 22,000 women, where they were in the country, and what their demographic was, and so that's why we designed a survey to begin to find out a bit more about that. So Ange, do you want to talk from this point?
Yeah, sure, thank you. So we wanted to really, before we designed any solutions, we needed to know kind of what the problems were, and there had been some really fantastic research done by ACO around employers and what they need in terms of feeling more comfortable about hiring women. We wanted to kind of test that within this post-COVID world, not that it is post, and we also really wanted to understand about these 22,000 women. We did talk to a number of different agencies about what can you give us, government agencies, and actually no one had really good line of sight on who they were. So we worked with a really great research company, and designed a survey where we went out to find out who these women were and what they considered were the opportunities and the barriers that they are finding in terms of entering the trades. And equally, we really wanted to find out what employers were feeling, what was their feeling around COVID, had their businesses been hit, were they getting more, was there more work available, with our skills shortage, we knew that was a thing, and what would they need to know before they would consider hiring women during this time. So we went out nationwide to women. We worked with staff, we worked with media, and we also did a lot of targeted targeted spend on a number of different social media sites. So we launched in April the 14th, and our goal was to get, if we could, 1,000 women to take our survey. And we totally aced that. We had over 2,200 women take our survey. And it was really, really interesting, because what we really wanted to understand more was if you were a woman who had lost her job due to COVID, like what are some of the key things that you are thinking about? We knew that Māori and Pasifika women were disproportionately affected by COVID job losses, but we didn't really know much more about their interest and inclination in joining the trades. So our survey went out. We also went out to employers and had over 200 employers take our survey. And as part of that, we knew that not everyone would want to take a survey. So we decided we really wanted to go around the country and have an opportunity to speak face-to-face with our female career seekers and our employers. So we went to 4 different locations and held focus groups, which were fascinating, I have got to say. And part of that was really interesting in the sense that we had a real diversity of people come to those focus groups, not only in terms of age, but in terms of ethnicity, and also kind of work readiness, I suppose we could say. We had a number of employers come to our sessions who, some had already employed women and were almost evangelical about how fantastic they were finding their female apprentices, and others who came along who were just kind of really needing reassurance and to learn more about what they needed to know to feel confident about hiring women into the trades. So there were some surprising findings. what we found with our survey was actually the women who are most interested in joining the trades skew a lot older than we were expecting. So women over 35, 35 to upwards of 50, to 55, by a really large percentage more the ones who are really interested in joining the trades. They also are well educated, having finished at least high school, with the majority having a tertiary education. And 55% of our sample actually they don't have dependents. So even though they may have children, they are not in the actively looking after those children, or they may have elderly parents, but they're not in the active stage of having caring responsibilities for those parents or other caring responsibilities. So this was really interesting to us, and also interesting to our employers when we kind of shared some of those insights in our focus groups. Because so often when we're thinking about apprenticeships and the trades, everything's kind of toward a much younger demographic. And it's not to say that younger women weren't interested in joining the trades, but there was this very large cohort of women who skew older who are really interested. And I suppose the big overall finding, which maybe isn't that surprising, was that women don't speak trades and trades don't really speak women. And there was this really big desire to kind of meet each other and know each other and find out more about each other, but a real kind of nervousness about doing that. About employers were telling us, we're really open to hiring women, but they never apply, or they never come and knock on my door. And our women were saying, how do we even apply? Like, how do we go and get these jobs? We're not feeling so confident because we've had a knock in terms of losing our jobs through COVID. What are our transferable skills? How do we turn this into trades language? We feel pretty confident that we'd be okay with these jobs, but we just don't know how to get in there. And also employers, when we ask them about, so what are your kind of a criteria around employing people? A lot of them, again, this is probably not surprising for the group here, we're saying, well, actually, we rely on word of mouth recommendations. And so there was this sort of constant state where one group we're kind of missing each other the whole time. And so, yeah, when we open this up to questions, really happy to go through a number that a lot of the women who are interested in joining the trades have actually got quite a high level of skill, even though they may not be trained. So a lot of the women we spoke to and heard from had done things like completely renovated their house, or built boats, or had a number of different things, who were really, had done a number of different things that suggested that they were interested in joining the trades and actually had done a lot of work in that space. Sort of jumping around a little bit here, but sort of to counter that, when we spoke to employers about, like, what would you need to know from women to feel confident about, offering them a job or an apprenticeship, and they would say, attitude is the most important thing, and we hire for attitude and we can teach skills. And then we sort of dug into that a little bit more. And whilst for younger men coming out of school, for example, that might be very true, for women, they had to really prove that they wanted to enter the trades. So they had to kind of like jump through another level of hoops in terms of, actually, I built a boat, or I've tiled all of my floor. And then that was something that employers were much more likely to say, oh, okay, well, maybe she's serious about this business. And when we sort of dug into flexible working, which a number of our women said was an important thing to them, actually a number of our employers were already doing that, but hadn't kind of thought about it within relation to women. So a lot of their staff might be co-parenting or have shared custody, so they are already doing a lot of this stuff anyhow. And on the list goes in terms of surprising findings, but we can talk about that later. So what we did was we decided that we wanted to make sure that we had a real diversity of thinking in terms of what some solutions might be to this. So we held co-design sprints in 3 different locations around the country. And we know that like lots of stats and facts can be really boring and no one listens to them. So we worked with a really fantastic actor named Tessa Waters and brought these characters or these personas who were based on our research to life. And we had 3 women who kind of represented the most common demographics and psychographics of the women in our survey. So we had someone who was like Eleanor, we called her. She was the older woman with, no dependence and had, some experience. We had Anahira, who is a Māori woman of our sample. They were the most likely to have caring responsibilities, and so we kind of modelled what it would be like for a woman with, caring responsibilities. And then we had a younger woman who was like 27, who had previously been employed in a tourism role and was really actively looking to work in the trades and was very interested in an apprenticeship model. And we also had Dave, who was one of our employers, who came along and who was really interested, but knew there was lots of stuff he didn't know and really wanted to make sure that he didn't get me too'd, and also knew that he wanted to do the right thing by women, but he just didn't really know how to employ them, or his main concerns were around pregnancy, what happens if someone gets pregnant. Periods was something that came up a lot. It's like, what happens if she gets her period at work? And we're like, Dave, you don't need to worry. No one really talks about that with their bosses. But anyway, and parenting was another big concern that our Dave character had. And so we kind of presented this information, and then we worked together to come up with some really great solutions to these hard problems. And from that, we have gone to phase 3, which we are just waiting for confirmation of our funding. But in that, we're really looking at developing a personalised service where we're matching employers with women and women with employers, a toolkit of resources, and a centralised hub where people can actually access the information that they need to feel really confident about A, applying for a job in the trades, and B, hiring women. Fast and furious presentation. Thank you very much. Questions?
Yes.
Thank you, guys.
You're welcome.
That was awesome. And of course, I'll declare at this point that I've got the privilege of being on the advisory group for this.
Yes.
And in our recent meeting, we talked about Dave and what we might do with him. Because I guess my question would be, for the longest time, there's just 2 sides to this coin, is around what particularly younger women aspire to in terms of roles and jobs and careers and that. And I wonder, when I think about the 2%, the 3% of female apprentices in some of those traditional trades, how lonely and brave that must be in terms of the glass ceiling, and so great to see more and more of them coming through. But how do you think we get to the Daves? Or how can we use Dave to try and change the attitudes of some of his also Daves? What do you think?
I mean, that is kind of what we're really focusing on, because without the employers on board, there's not really a project, to be honest. And I think what we've really found is that a lot of our employers feel kind of nervous about asking a dumb question. They're really concerned that they might ask something that makes them look sexist, or that they feel like maybe they should already know this information. So what we are doing in terms of phase 3 is taking a really humorous approach to this. And our Dave character in our focus groups and in our workshops is really funny. Like Tess is actually a stand-up comedian. So we have this really beautiful opportunity to allow people through the Dave character to get their questions that they would normally feel quite embarrassed about asking answered. So, and we know that personalised approach is really important. At our focus groups, we might have 10, 15 predominantly male employers who would kind of, you know, sort of chat openly, and then when it was time to finish, would kind of corner me and the team by saying, okay, I just really want to ask this quick question, but I don't want to ask it in a public setting. So we're trying to kind of offer that level of peer support and support, but also have this available to as many people as possible as well.
Yeah, definitely. Utilising those videos as a way to begin and open that conversation, and to make it something that can be talked about, and create that accessible line to those curated resources. So that's part of what we're looking at, is what already exists, so not reinventing the wheel, but utilising those videos to create a doorway to it. And also, of course, coupling that with that peer-to-peer support, you know, those employers that we do have within all of our industries that hire women regularly are fantastic advocates for it, and will constantly, you know, sing women's praises and the value that they bring, the diversity that it brings to their business in terms of diversity of thought and, you know, improvement of productivity, and utilising them to connect with their peers to be able to help answer some of those tricky questions as well.
Awesome. All right, I'm throwing it open. There is nothing in the chat, is there? No, nobody's put anything in the chat. Don't forget, you can always use the chat as our speakers are talking to throw in your questions and thoughts. But have we got anybody out there who wants to pipe up? Please go ahead. Gary's got his hand up.
Hi,
That's
Josh.
clever. Yep.
Look, thanks for the presentation. I was really keen to, I guess, just share some experiences in Australia. We're part of a group called Tradeswomen Australia. They've done some reviews into the very topic you've been talking about today. So we found similar issues around women that were comfortable to sort of be a little bit more proactive, seeking out trade jobs, were probably in their late 20s. It sort of took them 10 years of sort of life experience to probably build up enough courage and be proactive to seek out a job in the trades. We found that, you know, peer pressure when they're younger, and also, I guess, it's pressure from parents saying, well, that's not a job for a woman, was still fairly strong when they were a lot younger, and it sort of took them to their mid to late 20s to sort of say, well, no, stuff that, I'm going to go ahead and I want to do a career in a trade area. And also then I guess the other barriers you raised around the perceptions of employers, you know, what their expectations of what they would have to do on site to have a workplace that's suitable to have women on site. So toilet facilities, breaks, lifting equipment, you know, all the things that they probably haven't really thought about, just seem to have negative biases in terms of, well, I'm not even going to go and try and seek trying to diversify the workforce too much. So yeah, look, it was interesting. The 35-year-old's something that we haven't really seen here. Maybe the wages, again, maybe it's just me being a little bit negative towards, well, the apprenticeship wages are lower, people in their 30s may not be interested, but that's something we could look further at. But happy to share some reports in Australia that have looked into this at a fair level for you.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Just to sort of pick up on that apprenticeship wage, I mean, it's really interesting because our survey and focus group showed that these women are really interested in the trades, and they're interested because they see them as getting a skill, because that, you know, COVID has shown that they're the sort of the first to be dumped in terms of having an, you know, like being a retail worker. It's like, we'll just get rid of those people. And so they really see the trades as secure employment. And many of them said, look, this apprenticeship model as it currently stands doesn't really work for us as an older, you know, as an older group of women. And they were like, we are, you know, we might have mortgages, we're looking after families. Is there another way that we can still become qualified within the trades that isn't this apprenticeship model that many women said, you know, it assumes that you're living at home and your parents are able to help you out. It's like, if you're the parent, how do you do that? So I think that's really thrown something up to the industry to really think about. It's kind of like, how do we help older women, not that 35 years old, transition into employment, taking on board all of their life skills that they already currently have and those transferable skills. Rena,
yeah.
Yeah, hi, thank you. I just had a question around the scope of the project. Apprenticeships, as I've known them, are usually longer term, extend over a longer period of time. So does the project just focus on getting the women into trade, or does it also spend or does it also consider the idea of retaining the women in trade, considering the duration of the program?
Yeah, that's a really great question, Rena. And initially we did set out to look at those two components. So not only how do we encourage women to retrain who have lost their jobs, but how do we make sure once we've got them through the door that we can keep them. The scope of the funding, however, only looks at that immediate need, so getting women into work. So that's why that's the focus of the project, is really around that retrain piece. So what we wanted to do was to, with the solution, is to make sure that we're setting up women and employers the best that we can for success. And when we think about the rest of the work the Women in Trades Collective will be doing, and the different initiatives from the other ITOs, definitely falls into that space of supporting women through their apprenticeships. I know there's an awful lot more that we can be doing, and that we can look to work on in the future. But this presented a fantastic opportunity for us to be able to get some real traction.
And
fantastic.
This project, we're kind of moving at quite a quick pace in terms of wanting to have something in the market that is really useful and practical and helpful by mid to late July. So we're just having it's been really interesting because we're having to really keep within the scope of the project in terms of how do we help women who've lost their jobs, make that connection into the trades, whether that be through apprenticeships or whether that is in an administrative role or whatever that.
Sure, thank you. That's probably an idea for project 2, phase 1.
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Angela and Kelly, again, if people have got more questions, poke them into the chat and we'll make sure that we send them on. But we're going to be very, very efficient with our time and move on. But look, so thank you very much. So not only were you at the first GAN Professional Learning event, you were the first speaker at the first GAN Professional Learning event. No one can ever take that away from you. So look, I thank you so much for being here and explaining the project. I think it's fantastic. I hope the TEC has signed off on that phase 3 funding while we've been talking.
Yeah,
I hope you can stay on the line for the rest of the session. But let me do hand on. I've got little slides. I don't know whether I need to swap over to them or not. I'm not going to. I've made little slides for everybody. But Maretha Smit, is a delight to have. I think we're friends, aren't we, Maretha? I'm involved with the New Zealand Diversity Awards. I've been involved as an alliance partner previously of Diversity Works for several years. And of course, I don't know that this still needs to be said, but Diversity Works used to be called the Equal Employment Opportunities Trust. This is a long-standing equity organisation in the New Zealand landscape, particularly, and most visibly through its awards, but also through an extraordinary amount of work that it does alongside many, many, many organisations all around New Zealand on issues to do with equity and inclusion and diversity. So Maretha herself is a native of South Africa. She's held senior leadership roles here and in South Africa, including with equity and inclusion focus. And I think I first met Maretha when she worked at Competens. So we've also got some industry training organisation credentials in there as well. So look, Maretha, thank you very much for agreeing to be part of our session today. And I know that you've been doing some work, and I won't steal any of your speaking points, but to talk about education and training, and particularly gender, as that plays out in that wider kind of diversity and inclusion kaupapa and some of the strategies that Diversity Works is rolling out into Aotearoa at the moment. So no more introduction. Maretha, over to you.
Lovely, kia ora koutou katoa. Thank you for that introduction, Josh. It really is lovely to be joining you this afternoon, and likewise, as Kelly said, great to be hearing more about GAN and also the work that's been done by the ITO sector and this important kaupapa. So you have actually just given a little bit of background of Diversity Works, so that saves me a few words. Thank you very much for that. We are going to be 30 years of age next year, so looking forward to celebrating that as a former Equal Employment Opportunities Trust. We are a membership-based organisation. We currently have almost 600 members, and those are all organisations who are part of the movement of building a more equitable and more inclusive society. So our job is to help these organisations to do diversity and inclusion well, and for them to do well of it. And my korero here today is slightly more theoretical, I suppose, as I'll start off with making the case for and presenting the framework for workplace inclusion. And I'll then make it practical by talking a little bit about how we are using this framework in our work with the Construction Accord. And I think that there's many parallels with what we've just heard from Kelly and Angela. Speaking about frameworks for workplace inclusion, I suppose not at odds with the issue of vocational education, because we know that the majority of learning in VET happens in the workplace. So we also know that for women apprentices in a traditionally male-dominated industry, there's this double barrier to overcome, much of what we've heard now through the work from Kelly and Angela, but also we face not only a hierarchical barrier due to the trainee status, but also that gender barrier, and which often puts women at significant risk and of psychologically unsafe work environments. So I'm going to just share my screen if I can do this properly. Can somebody just give me a steer whether this works?
We can see that perfectly.
Perfectly. Okay, so as I said, our job as Diversity Works is to unlock social and economic success through workplace inclusion. Benefits of an inclusive culture, and we start focusing on inclusion because we have so much diversity in our ecosystem that we always go diversity by default, but really we need to design for inclusion. So key aspects of an inclusive culture, firstly, is that social license, that having a diverse workforce is the right thing to do. Secondly, about productivity, the fact that diversity enhances performance. And thirdly, about sustainability, the fact that diversity can be used as a tool to plan for success. So, as I said, we do have that immense diversity in New Zealand to draw from in populating our workforces. And we often think that if we train more people from traditionally non-dominant groups, we will solve that problem. But really it is, as we've heard earlier, it is about retention, and how do we solve the issues that our people face when there are non-dominant groups that they face in the workplace. So what we've done as Diversity Works was, next slide there, is to go in search of inclusivity. What does this mean? So over the past decade or so, workplaces across the globe have jumped into action to implement initiatives to build more inclusive cultures. And a myriad of types of initiatives and policies and buzzwords have emerged. Everything from diversity champions to relational bridges to employee networks to pay gap analyses to dissent management, you name it, it's thrown at addressing the issue of inclusion. This is not necessarily a bad thing. It shows that the environment has matured significantly with regards to these kinds of questions. But the question was now, where does an organization start? If you do want to be more inclusive, if you do want to attract more people from non-dominant groups, how do they connect all of these disparate initiatives into something that makes sense and give their people the confidence that they are intentional and authentic about this, and not just reacting to some of the latest trends. So for us, especially us here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, we felt that there was nothing to be gained by organisations working in competition with each other. We really wanted to push above our weight as a country, so we need to do this together. And so we started the 9-month process of research and consultation to build a framework that will provide the strategic direction about how it all fits together, these initiatives, and how that really can work in a roadmap for success. So it's about shifting organisational philosophy from being reactive to being proactive, by understanding existing gaps, and by building a national standard by which we can hold each other accountable, and all be jointly part of this process of building a more equitable society, and creating that shared sense of purpose. So with that, the Aotearoa Inclusivity Matrix was born. We very affectionately refer to it as AIM, and we're intending for this to be a very all-encompassing national standard for inclusivity in the workplace. So it's about this comprehensive system. Firstly, the framework, and that is the part of work that we've completed to have a map of what good looks like. Secondly, to have instruments sit behind that map to assess organisations and support them in terms of understanding their gaps. And then thirdly, the change model that helps organisations develop a roadmap from where they currently are to understanding where they might be, what it is that they want to shift, what the return on investment would be for specific initiatives, and putting that together for their people to also understand. So it's about where to, where now, and how to do this. It's just a little bit about building this framework, how we went about. So we wanted to demonstrate what really, really good looks like in our work. Very often our organizations and our members are asking us, so what am I aiming for? Where do I want to go to? So we wanted to get that archetype really well defined. What does good look like? We wanted to show a path. How do we get from where organizations are now to what really good looks like? And they may not be even at starter level, they might be somewhere else in the journey, but at least giving that sense of direction. We wanted to create a standard and a benchmark across all of the various components of inclusion. We wanted to make gaps visible, where organizations can start doing some interventions, and providing information for them to make those decisions, creating connections between the various initiatives, and absolutely celebrating the success and where they are going to with the organization. So the AIM components, what we have done in our 9-month literature review is to firstly look at what's that international best practice, and how do we frame that up into what the various components of diversity and inclusion and inclusive workplaces would be. And the first, absolutely, as one would guess, is leadership. It's about the support, the values, the accountability, and the strategic approach taken to diversity and inclusion, as opposed to silos and initiatives that are tactical but not strategically linked. The second is about diversity infrastructure. And I think that this is where a lot of the work that what we're discussing today and the work that we need to doing is still sitting. It's about what are those policies, cornerstone policies, targeted policies, the intervention, and the climate for individuals in that organization. And here we are talking across all dimensions of diversity. We are talking about gender specifically, yes, because we make up more than half of the workforce anyway, but it's also about ethnicity. It is about religion, it is about disability, and it's about tying all of those, our rainbow community, providing that infrastructure through policies, processes, and what people need. If it is about ablution facilities on site, that is part of the infrastructure that helps with inclusion in the workforce. Then we were looking at diverse recruitment. It is about that pipeline. How do we design jobs? How do we attract people to apply for those jobs? And how do we recruit into those jobs? What organizations' maturity levels would be in that recruitment pipeline? The fourth one internationally that makes up best practice is about how do we develop careers? How do we not get stuck once people have entered the workforce in a specific role? So it's about that training, the inclusive development, remuneration, talent succession, and cultural preparation. But we are in Aotearoa, New Zealand. We do have some things that make us uniquely a people. And we really looked at what that would look like for workplaces here. So the very first one, we obviously are bicultural. And we are leading the world in terms of the opportunity that we have here to truly bring different worldviews together in a cohesive society. So we needed to bring biculturalism as one of the components in our AIM framework. And it's about that competence, it's about representations, it is about the systems being designed through a bicultural lens and responsibilities that we have in terms of the tiriti. Then the second one that we have is in terms of inclusive collaboration. And here we are not a hierarchical society, which gives us significant opportunity to be a lot more bold in how we insist on safe workplaces for all and what safety means. So that's about awareness. It's about the skills for inclusion. It's about styles of communication. It's about things like approach to dissent. How do we deal with that from an inclusively collaborative perspective? And the final one that makes us a people is our insistence to have social impact. We pride ourselves on the fact that we are an egalitarian society, but we are at risk of slipping into levels of inequity that will be seriously damaging to us and our social cohesion and our economy. So we need to be very intentional in not letting that happen on our watch. So social impact is about using those platforms to have an impact beyond organization, the walls of the organization, the customer representation, supplier relations, information, the educational campaigns and systems, and so forth. So those being the components, this is quite a busy slide, and I'm not going to go through that in detail, but this was from a process perspective. We first wanted to look at the archetype of what real excellence look like through the lens of those 7 key components. So this very rich list of outcomes was pulled together, and that pulls together all of those disparate initiatives that we saw in the earlier slide. And it actually just shows what are those outcomes that in an ideal inclusive world, and knowing and understanding that this is an ever-evolving field, but what would we today be expecting from organizations? If we had to go to a small business of 20 people in Central Otago, the likelihood of this being scary rather than helpful was probably very high. So we had to pull up and roll up these indicators into what is academically called the highest level of abstraction to make it easier for organizations to understand. So the detail sitting behind these statements then became part of our assessment instruments. And we've done this for each of the components. So we're replacing all of that with a plain statement that says for leadership, diversity, equity, inclusion is embedded in the culture, supported by an accountable leadership in a proactive and exemplary manner. That is understandable. And then we would, as I saw earlier, what we would have behind that as indicators and outcomes would support that statement. And we've done that for every single one of those components, which then gave us our final archetype of what good looks like. The next job that we had was then to decide on the journey. How do we get to that archetype or that pathway to support organizations with an understanding of where they are and where they can get to? And again, through our research, we found that we needed to create a pathway that will show progress from resistance to learning. Secondly, from sporadic to systemic. Thirdly, from reactive to proactive. From biculturally unaware to an embedded bicultural organization. From equality to equity. And finally, from internal focus to external focus. So that being the way in which we look at this pathway, we then found our maturity levels, which is from starter maturity, emerging, developer, integrated, and advanced. And that just shows across each one of those components how, from a position of being unaware, organizations systematically step through a position until they can get to a position of advanced. And it is important to understand that it can happen throughout these various 7 of components in different ways for different organizations. The journey towards inclusive workplaces is not a linear one, and very often it's possible to be more advanced in one level than it is in another. So just for a little bit of show and impact, this is where we ended. When we put it all together, it looks like this. So we've got the maturity levels on the horizontal axis and all of the inclusion components on the vertical axis, with a short description in each of the cells, and then the selection of the main outcome indicators on the far right. So this would be the first 3 ones of leadership, diversity, infrastructure, and diverse recruitment. And then the next ones would be career development, biculturalism, collaboration, and social impact. So I'm not going to go into this in detail. You're most welcome to download the framework. It is freely available on our website. But what we see is that makes for a really great theoretical understanding for workplaces of what an inclusive culture and environment looks like. And it definitely creates some kind of shared language amongst the people leaders in the organization when they start looking at where to next. But the real fun happens when we start putting all of this through the formal assessment to identify the gaps and to put this together into a practical roadmap to build those more inclusive workplaces. So with that then, just a quick touch on the work that we are doing with the construction sector accord, and it is in first stages. So it's also exciting to see how the dots are starting to connect, because I know through our program manager for this piece of work, we are actually connecting in with Kelly and Angela to ensure that we do this well and add real value, that we're not duplicating in any way. But yeah, so I think that from a construction and infrastructure perspective, I always love the quote from Winston Churchill that says, as we shape our buildings, they thereafter start shaping us. And construction and infrastructure no longer is just simply bricks and mortar or pipes and roads, and it is critical to the well-being of all of our people. And it needs to be shaped in such a way as to represent the needs and the desires and the aspirations of those communities that we serve. We will probably for many years still deal with a legacy of infrastructure that was planned and executed by homogenous teams of people and who didn't have the lived experience of the needs of those diverse communities. And we now know that this caused real structural damage and harm to women, to people from disabled communities, rainbow communities, and specifically our ethnic communities. And we also know that people from our non-dominant groups, as we've heard today a couple of times, our women and our migrants have been disproportionately impacted by COVID. So the question is, how do we, through a more inclusive construction and infrastructure sector specifically, support these people and build our economy? So with this, we have started a project with the Construction Sector Accord called the Accord Diversity Roadmap. And there we are really looking into the construction sector transformation plan, which is a 3-year program to lift the performance of the sector. So through their people work stream, they would like to build capacity through creating a long-term workforce plan. And the barrier that they have there is a diversity barrier. Firstly, that women make up 18% of the construction-related workforce, and we know when it comes to trades, it is only 16, or it drops down to if it's the construction-specific professions. And we know that we've got underrepresentation in Maori and Pacific people in the skilled professions. So just on one slide, we are at the beginning stages of this project. So we all know that basic business wisdom, it's cheaper to delight an existing customer and retain them to acquire a new one, and the same goes for employees. But we do still very often view diversity as a recruitment issue. So while the vocational education sector is doing an incredible job in attracting women and people from the non-dominant groups to these careers. Also, as we've heard from Kelly and Angela, the workplaces where they land are often not inclusive and conducive for them to bring their best selves. So our project will be taking place in 2 phases. The first is a 360-degree assessment against AIM, following very much the same kind of methodology that we've heard earlier. It's about capturing the existing status of inclusion in the sector across the whole of the AIM framework. And our assessment tools would include a leadership self-assessment. It would also include a perceived diversity survey against the framework, and that would be employee-led. There would be some verification through industry and stakeholder base, and we would do quite a bit of desktop research and data analysis, also in collaboration with other complementary research initiatives in the sector to make sure that we add that value. And then the second phase of this project would be to design that roadmap, to look at which will also be a co-design once we've delivered the gap analysis through a series of focus groups. So timelines, we've started the work with the Accord in April of 2021, and we will be in the field during June and July. We will deliver our gap analysis during August, September, roadmap design in Q4, so quite tight there as well. And that just brings together we're using our framework and map to understand where to, where's the sector now, and our roadmap and change model as to where do we go back to. So I'm just using that earlier slide. So it is an exciting program of work, and we're expecting to see from the roadmap that we will have many recommendations for interventions, both on organizational level and on industry level. And please keep an eye out on comms if you're interested, or drop us a note if you want to participate in any way. So I am going to try and unshare myself. Oh dear. There we go. Have I unshared? Stop sharing.
Maretha, thank you very, very much. And unsharing, I wish I could help you, but I've received word that there's been a fire alarm at the Auckland office at the Skills Consulting Group.
Yeah.
Technical support has left the building. She may be back at some stage, but no, we're going to be fine. Maretha, thank you very, very much for the presentation. And I think that's what really is exciting about that is I know the work that's gone into the inclusivity matrix around, I think, the importance, as you said, of getting people on using a common language, both inside workplaces or when employers talk to one another and workplaces talk to one another. So, you know, being on the same page and then being able to apply it into a situation such as through the construction accord is fantastic. I know that inclusivity matrix has also underpinned a total revamp of the diversity awards, and which I can speak from personal experience is really helping us to see the value in the journeys that workplaces are making, not just always focusing on the very, very kind of excellence end. So look, thank you very much again for being part of it. Has anybody, Reena Patel, there's a hand up. We've got a couple of minutes, and I do see that Mahsa's joined us as well. So do welcome Dr. Mahsa Mohaghegh, who we'll be hearing from shortly. Reena, question?
Yes, please. Thank you. I was wondering if you could please elaborate on what consideration, if any, has been given to diversity and representation as part of the inclusion project.
So there's always this story in diversity and inclusion, which comes first? Is it diversity and inclusion, or is it inclusion and diversity? It probably is a little bit of semantics. Yes, diversity and representation is critical in order for us to reap the benefits of the diverse society that we have. Diversity we have in our overall society is, that's what we say is default. Organizations can do little other but to employ diverse workforces. We need to ensure that when they land in those organizations, that they land safely. we do quite a lot of work separate to this AIM framework in terms of how do we support, and this is probably where the representation piece comes in terms of the diverse recruitment. How do we support organizations to really recruit the diverse and to attract those the diversity into their workplaces? But it doesn't stop with attracting those applications and those people. We need to make sure they are safe and that they are included in order to bring their best selves.
Thank you.
Cool. Well, look, we are running ridiculously to time. And so with that, again, I'm not sure, I've had a message from one of my colleagues, and again with the Auckland people out of the office, but if some people can't see the chat or can't react, I'm sorry about that. We'll have a look into the reasons for it, but I do know that that's affecting at least one person, but maybe it's an error in the chair keyboard interface. So as far as that goes, again, Maretha, look, honestly, a huge honour and privilege to have you as part of the session. Thank you so much for giving up your time. I know that you're an incredibly busy person, particularly at this time of the year. So look, I really appreciate your presentation, and thank you so much for being part of the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh.
All right, so the next thing I need to do is for me to share my screen and make sure that my sound works. Because the next presenter is Nazrene Mannie, who's the Executive Director of GAN Global, based there in Switzerland. However, it is a pre-recorded presentation because right now in Switzerland, as you can imagine, it's 4:15 in the morning. So Nazrene we've got one that she's prepared earlier. But if I press play on that right now, then we'll also be running exactly to time, and then we will have our one final session, Dr. Mahsa Mohaghegh from AUT and Shisha. So without any further ado, I really hope this works. How do you do the window thingy? They've changed it on Teams. They do that every now and then just to keep you awake. I just have to do my screen because I'm not seeing the window come up. I'll make it bigger, but can you hear it?
Kia ora and good afternoon to all. It's a real pleasure to join you from very sunny Switzerland. I'm saying that because we've just had the coldest April and May in about 25 years, and I thought summer would never come, so I'm very pleased. It's a real privilege for me to be present today on behalf of GAN Global. My name is Nazrene Mannie, and I'm the ED of GAN. And I'm so happy with the work that our partners in New Zealand have been doing. And I think today's discussion is a really critical one, looking at gender equity issues, looking at the role of education and inclusiveness in education. And I think it's a real privilege to be able to be with you and share some of the developments happening at a global level on this very important topic. I have a brief presentation that I would like to take you through. And the presentation really just covers some of the developments that are happening within the global space. And as you can imagine, equity, inclusion are becoming really important topics in all of our engagements. And I've had the pleasure of participating in a number of fora recently, including the B20 discussions on employment and education, as well as the B20 Special Initiative on Women's Empowerment. And having been appointed a UN gender champion, it also gives us access to conversations within the multilateral system. So let me share what's happening, and you'll see that this resonates across GAN global members, as well as our partners within the OECD, the ILO, the IOE, and business at OECD. And really, we've seen that the issue of inclusion of gender equity fits so well within our ambition and purpose. It's fundamental to the idea of sustainable skills development. If we're looking at creating skilling opportunities for all segments of the workforce, that really means all segments, and looking at our marginalized sectors of our communities and the labor market. And we as GAN see that work-based learning gives us the opportunity to engage and partner with leading organizations to address these challenges from both a private sector perspective as well as the global development policy perspective. I think COVID is something that we cannot ignore. While you in New Zealand have been a little bit more insulated than the rest of us, I think we still need to take into account how we address pandemics with a gender lens, understanding the issue of the economic impact, the politics, which we can't get away from, the care economy, and how we manage aspects of personal care, family care, and the healthcare system. And then there have been two additional areas. One, innovation. And I think innovation has been something that's been at the forefront in the response to COVID. And I'm pleased to see the number of women who have been driving innovations in terms of vaccine technology and breakthroughs in biomedical science. And on the flip side, we've also seen a real growth, unfortunately, in numbers of domestic violence victims, abuse, online, physical. And I think there are a number of challenges we have to address at both a societal level as well as a political and economic level when it comes to violence. In terms of the labour market and the relationship with gender equity, I think we must be quite honest and acknowledge how disproportionate it is. It's clear in looking at the labour market fallout from COVID that some sectors have been more affected than others. And unfortunately, those sectors are where women form a greater majority in the workforce. Tourism, hospitality, food services and production, the accommodation industry. There really is a gender bias here, and women have been more likely to lose their jobs during the last 18 months than men. And this is relevant even in East Asia and the Pacific region. In terms of healthcare, we know that women are on the front line just by virtue of the fact that 70% or more, depending on the country, of the healthcare sector is staffed by women. And they have been at the coalface of the pandemic and exposed to chronic healthcare issues. This is in a sector where virtual work doesn't work, where work from home is not an option. So how do we manage safe and create safe spaces? This is where PPE becomes critical. Access to safe workplaces is essential, and ensuring that the right equipment is in place, the right social structures are in place is key. The impact on migrant workers, particularly women, has been heartfelt, not just from an economic perspective where remittances, for example, have decreased substantially over the last year and a half, but also the related socioeconomic challenges around work insecurity, impact on income, the issues around violence and harassment, which you cannot escape, access to services, social services, economic services, and then the mental health issue. I think the one positive out of the last year plus that we've seen is an increasing acceptance for us to discuss mental health issues publicly and to be able to provide support, meaningful and systematic and systemic support to employees, to citizens, and engage in discussions around mental health and the impact of mental health on our well-being, our health, as well as our ability to function in the workplace. There is a very real impact on women in the informal sector. Again, global estimates show that women form a greater part of the informal economy. And this has very severe repercussions when we look at social security. So when safety nets are put in place, when governments create aid packages, it's not always that those in the informal sector can prove income, can demonstrate a pay slip, for example. So how do they access the support? Again, the issues of care, particularly caring for the home, housework, childcare, family care, have become exacerbated as a result of the pandemic and have created a very real impact on women, in many cases having to leave the workplace to address family demands. the closure of schools, and at some stage early on, around June last year, there were an estimated 1.3 billion children at home. This meant that many children did not have care. They also did not have access to technology, so digital learning, online learning, those were not opportunities that poorer segments of our communities could meaningfully access. It also meant that mums had to take a greater role in teaching, which is not necessarily a career they may be involved in. But the fact is it's impacted on women, and the burden on the healthcare system is a whole other issue, and the ripple effect on family planning, maternal mortality rates, neonatal care, etc. Those have all been affected and impacted on by the healthcare system's focus on COVID patients. Understandably so, it's a pandemic time, but it also means that women have borne the brunt of the shift in focus. And the impact on young girls leaving school, and in many cases may not return, will have very long-term effects. What we will start seeing likely over the next year or two is increased rates in underage marriage, younger mums. These girls will not return to school in many countries, and there will be this generational gap in terms of labour market and economic activity that will in turn be experienced. Let's move on to some solutions, and I think we're seeing some shifts at a global policy level focusing on education and employment. I have the privilege, as I mentioned, of participating in a B20 task force focusing on employment and education, and some of the task force recommendations are really around addressing future skills supplies, so ensuring that the schooling systems are equipped, that curricula are designed and developed, taking into account demand-led learning needs, ensuring agile education systems. Then how do we ensure that adults and children are constantly prepared for this rapidly evolving workplace where the nature of work is fundamentally shifting? And we're seeing the need there for lifelong learning, for work-based learning. How do you connect school to work in a more meaningful way, in a more dynamic way? What does this mean for qualifications? We're discussing with the team in GAN New Zealand, for example, about the potential for digital apprenticeship, because that's something that is emerging as a need. Then building effective lifelong learning systems is critically important because it needs a systematic approach. The policy frameworks need to be in place, your social partners need to engage, and there needs to be funding for such systems to ensure access, and access must be equitable, and it must be open. And then importantly, the pandemic has also highlighted that this digital divide that we talk about is very real. Physical and distance learning is not so easy to shift to. Many of our education systems were not equipped for remote learning. The need for hardware and software, physical equipment, laptops, smartphones, access to the internet, data, these are key issues that we need to address. And I'm very pleased to see the work that GAN New Zealand is doing with GAN Global in our Microsoft-funded digital skilling project, because we really are starting to address this. And I think this leads to the last point around partnerships, and how important it is for all sectors to work together. This multi-system, multi-partner approach, government, the private sector, communities, are fundamental to shaping these relevant and responsive solutions. And then my last slide is around how to address gender equity at a global level. So if we need to address the labour market fallout from COVID, we then need strategies to meaningfully bring back women into economic activity. We need to create targeted strategies to hire more women, and not just at entry-level jobs, at all levels of the workforce. Gender parity in senior decision-making is key. We need more women leaders. It's clear. We need women on boards. We need women in government. I think as New Zealand, you really have set the bar what our female politicians can do, and your Prime Minister is a shining star and an example of the new kind of leadership that we need: empathy, understanding, driving a community-based approach to leadership and decision-making. Importantly, the provision of childcare is key, because it is clear that if women need to stay at home to look after children, then they cannot engage in the labour market consistently. And we need to make sure that we address this issue as one of urgency. Then driving this focus on technology participation, so STEM and STEAM, which includes the arts, looking at where the high growth sectors are, and then targeting solutions and strategies to drive this. Finally, moving on to innovation, research. How can we ensure that women are part of these discussions? We need to have the participation of women in the economy at all levels, driving entrepreneurial activities, including financing, venture capital, angel funding, etc. We need to have that. And then importantly, removing the violence and harassment aspect from meaningful engagement. So here are a few solutions, and I hope these add value to the discussion today. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Okay. Thank you to Nazrene for beaming into us there, and thank you to all of you who remain on the call. I can still see quite a number of bubbles. I do want to just move along because we are pretty much sticking to time. It's my really deep pleasure to welcome to the call and to the session Mahsa Mohaghegh. Hello, Mahsa. Lovely to meet you, and thank you so much for being part of our session today. Mahsa is the Professor of IT and Computer Sciences at Auckland University of Technology, and that's a very nice virtual background that you've got there. But the reason we've got her here today, and you heard Nazrene talk a little bit about the work that GAN, as the new kid on the block, at least in New Zealand, has been doing with Microsoft and picking up on some of the industry signals around digital apprenticeships. And of course, we immediately get into any number of good reports that we're lucky to have access to in New Zealand about underrepresentation in the industry. And that certainly in our context relates to Māori at 4%, and Pacific students at 2.8%, but women at 27%. So you don't get very far into this without discovering SheSharp, which is the company that Mahsa is the founder and director of. Mahsa is also, I think, a 2 times finalist of Women in Influence Awards in New Zealand. I think I've got that right. This is all from memory. But is also, clearly one of the change makers in New Zealand in this space, and delivering programs on the ground to attract young women into the ICT sector. So we thought, who better? Let's have Dr. Mahsa Mohaghegh's perspective on how we attract more women into the ICT and tech sectors, and her take on gender inclusion issues more broadly. Mahsa, over to you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Josh, and kia ora koutou to all of your attendees for this event. So my apologies for not being able to attend the whole event, which I was really looking forward to, but just get out of the examination of our master's students. So I just managed to make it to time, and I just heard that you're still keeping on time. So I'm hoping that I'm not going to, changing your schedule. So thank you so much for your kind invitation. And today, really, the idea is just giving you and all of your participants here a little bit information about who we are and what we do, and the passion behind SheSharp and the need of gender diversity within a tech world. So I would like to share my slides with you. So please let me know if you can actually see them. Would you be able to see that? And I would really like to keep the session as interactive as possible. Any questions, any ideas, please leave it for me in a chat. And we do have some time at the end for question answering as well. So my role at the moment, I am a director of Women in Tech within a design and creative technologies at AUT. Also, I'm a senior lecturer in the School of Engineering, Computer and Mathematical Sciences, and founder of SheSharp. So I've been in the tech world for over 20 years now, and today talk is really to just, highlighting the need of gender diversity in this field. So I'll put some of information if you would like to find me, or, if anything after these sessions that interests you, that you would like to know more about it, so you will be able to find me. But let's start with She Sharp. So She Sharp is a charitable trust started in 2014, and today I'm going to share with you a little bit of story behind She Sharp, how we started it and why we started it in the first place. But it is really a networking platform for women in tech. So it is a place to bring professionals from industry, high school students, and tertiary students, and provide them opportunity to connect, to learn, and to share ideas and challenges. So it is really something that was missing for me when I was a student. And the idea behind it was really starting this platform to connect everyone. But not only that, we do a little bit more than, connecting women in tech, which I'm actually going to tell you a little bit more about it. But I want to start by asking a question. Although I know that you're all, there's no video on, but there's options here that you would be able to show, raise your hand and show me some reaction. So I really want to ask you that, have you ever been part of the minority? Anyone here been part of the minority? I can see a few hands there, which is fantastic. So I think we've all been part of the minority in different places, and I've certainly been part of the minority of women in tech for a long time, and I'm not really complaining about it, and I'm not saying it was easy either, but I would really benefit if I have more female colleagues, or if I had more female friends when I was a student. So I moved to New Zealand in 2008 to do my PhD in artificial intelligence and computer engineering. And at the time in 2008, I was the only girl doing computer engineering at Massey University in Auckland. It came as a little bit shock to me, but it wasn't a surprise. The reason for that, because during my master's degree back in Iran, I was the only girl in a class of 50. And I just thought probably that is something to do with the country, moved here still being the only PhD student. So I thought probably this is something to do with my generation. And I started lecturing at university, and 2009, since 2009, I've been lecturing in different universities here in New Zealand. A couple of years ago, in a class of 250 students, I still remember it clearly, that I only had 5 girls in my class. And today, although I'm not lecturing big classes any longer, I work mainly with PhD and master students. But even in my master classes right now, and sometimes when I go to our undergrad classes, the number of girls is really less than 10%. So as you can see, we're still struggling with that. And it is not only New Zealand. I'm aware that many different countries, especially a neighbor here in Australia, they're dealing with it. US, it's a big issue as well. Europe as well. So you name it. Unfortunately, the number of women in tech all over the world, it is very low. And to give you an idea, in artificial intelligence itself, we only, globally, we only have 22% of all women doing AI, artificial intelligence. If you're wondering what's going on here in New Zealand, so in New Zealand at the moment in our tech sector, so we have around 26-27%, and that was the recent report coming from NZ Tech when they did work around digital, the shortage of digital skill here in New Zealand just a couple of months ago that released. But what is the problem? The problem is really clear. The problem is we only have 3% of our 15-year-old high school girls even considering a career in tech. So this is really sad. It means that we definitely have to start, and we have a lot of work to do when our girls are at the early age and they're just still probably starting a primary, or maybe we have to fight with these stereotypes from early on, from daycare, because when they are 15, they're already made up their mind. They know if tech is for them or is not for them. And if you're losing them at that age, so it's so hard to just, convert them back to tech later on. Having said that, with the future of work and just being so much uncertainty about the types of job that we will see in the future, I think it's a fair play for all of us to say we can be a woman in tech. We can actually become a techie person just by upskilling and learning about digital technology. There is no barrier. There is nothing to stop them from that. But wouldn't it have been great that we could actually get our girls to the program from early on, and we help them to thrive through their high schools, coming to university, join the industry, rather than they have to just, if they decided to be part of this community of tech, they have to just go through the self-learning, which might be a little bit, challenging. But again, we're still telling them that nothing can stop them to join this group. So this is our mission. So our mission is really establishing that networking platform for women in STEM, science, technology, engineering, math, and advocate for gender balance in industry. So how did we do that? I am a great believer of this specific quote from Benjamin Franklin, that tell me and I forget, teach me and I may remember, involve me and I learn. I've been since I was 7 years old, the fact that I got to technology was through that experience that my dad helped me to be part of. And I remember he took me to the computer hardware store to buy a motherboard for his computer. And I was so fascinated with the board, electronic component, and more than actually what you can do with the whole system. So funny enough, even till a couple of years ago, I've been in charge of the course hardware technology at university. And the reason for it, because I really wanted to show the practical, the fun part of the technology to our next generation. And with She-Shop in 2014, we decided to create this platform for women not only to connect and learn from each other, but also to create something that they can take back to their community, they can take back to the school, back to university, something that they can be proud of, and they can talk about it after events. So many of us, they've been in these amazing, inspiring events, but if you get to do something, create or build something in that, this is something that you will remember and you will, understand better after that. So I can see Megan raise a hand. Megan, do you have a question or you agree with me?
No, I agree. I accidentally raised my hand, but I'm finding it fascinating.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So it was the reason we just thought, great, let's have events in different tech companies, because we really want our girls to see what is going on within this tech company. We want to fight that stereotypes that tech is designed for our geeky, nerdy guys who's sitting in a room and doing coding all day long. It is not really true. We have to fight these stereotypes, these perceptions, and we have to really fight with this peer pressure for our girls in the school. So what we noticed that many of the girls, they don't really see that human-centric part of the tech. If we're trying to talk about tech as an enabler, as a tool that they can help other people to have a better life, make their life easier, help them with creativity to create something nice. So we probably have a better chance to encourage more girls to come to these fields. At the moment, even some of our job descriptions is completely, I believe it's putting all of our girls off. So I recently saw an ad around for looking for a developer, and the ad was, we are looking for a ninja coder. Honestly, as a woman, I don't want to be a ninja coder. I don't really want to work in as a ninja in that company. So we have to be very mindful that how we really marketing technology to our next generation. Be very mindful of the words we use, the way that we are approaching our next generation, because probably we have a better chance by doing that. So with She-Shop, we thought, okay, let's connect them. Let's hearing some inspiring stories from women doing amazing things in this field. But not only that, the second part of the event, let's help them to create, build, and make something without even mentioning a word about technology, coding, programming, engineering. Let them to just taste technology for themselves. And after that, let them decide if tech is a career path for them or not. We don't want to push everyone to come to the tech after all. So we started running events from, the events are usually 2 hours happening in the evening. The first part of it for an hour, sometimes 40 minutes, it is a talk or a panel. We stop for a networking, a little bit of a kai in the middle. And at the end of it, with the hour or sometimes hour and a half, we teach something new. So we had session from teaching students to create an app in 45 minutes. We had sessions around security and hacking, ethical hacking 101. Just last night, we had session around artificial intelligence, and I interviewed 5 amazing women that they do great things in a field of artificial intelligence, and none of them they came through the traditional pathway to technology. This is just to show and, highlighting opportunities out there. So we started like that, and as you can see, hands-on practical sessions. We have a specific events targeted different age group, and we have events that we're bringing all the 3 groups together. So some of the events is specifically designed for high school students. Some of the events are for professional from industry and university graduate students, and sometimes we have all of them together. All of this is started by me having an opportunity to be able to be part of an amazing group of women in 2013 in Sydney. I received an award from Google, and that award was in a memory of someone named Anita Borg. At the time, I didn't even know about Anita Borg. And as a result of that scholarship and retreat, I got invited to go to the headquarters of Google back in Sydney and to be connected with other women that they're doing work in a tech space. And that was there that I learned about Anita Borg. So if you don't know her, I would highly recommend you just Google her, just go to the YouTube. So there's a very short video about her life. I remember I was looking at that video and I was thinking about her mission and how much she was passionate about, closing a gender gap. But unfortunately, she didn't stay long enough to be able to see that there are many people all around the world. They are still pursuing her passion and her goal. So she had a goal that by 2020, we will get to 50% gender diversity. Unfortunately, we are far from it now, but there are a lot of works happening to help us to get to that point. So she passed away from brain tumor, but her institute, Anita Borg Institute, still providing support for many women in tech by giving them a scholarship, connecting them to the mentors, or helping them just simply to thrive. So hearing about her life, back in 2013, I came back from that event, and 2014, with a group of 5 or 6 students from different universities. At the time I was PhD student, we started She-Shop. So I'm glad that to say She-Shop at the moment, we have over 1,000 members just in Auckland. And the idea behind it was really creating role models for our next generation. And for me, looking back at Anita Borg, she was my role model. And I just thought she did her part. I have to do my part as an individual. I might not be able to get to 50-50 by 2020, but if we do our own job as individual, we can achieve it. And we have to create more role model for our next generation, because you can't be what you can't see. So our mission, as I told you, is to bridge the gender gap in STEM, one female at a time. There's a lot of work, but we are so excited being able to work with the different women across the country in the last 7 years. And we're providing this platform, as I told you, to run events and connect them to women in tech, and also teach them different things through technology. So at the moment in New Zealand, as I mentioned before, so we are around 27%, but really our goal is to get to that sometime. So we run different events, and we had around 46 events hosted in partnership with different corporate and community partners. We have over 1,000 members, and we were recognized by Diversity Awards in 2019 as we received the Excellence Award as a small organization, which we are very proud of it, and we were really grateful for recognition of our work through a She Shop. And the charity work, it is not possible with the help and support of passionate group of people that they all believe in our mission and our cause, and they're helping us throughout years. So at the moment, our ambassadors and committee, there are these lovely ladies that each of them, they have a very unique background. Some of them professional from industry, some of them students. We had 2 high school students, they just graduated and they just joined our board. And it is amazing to work with them. And throughout 7 years, so I think we had over 25 different ambassadors that they came on board and helping us with the events and the whole organizations. And this is really to provide and helping them with the leadership skill and provide them with some experiences that they can actually take back to their workplaces. Each of them, they're championing women in tech in their own organization. And it is really great that we not only within a She Shop, we can have some impact in other big organizations like Spark and universities as well. We have 3 main sponsors this year, MYOB, AUT, and Google. They are our main sponsor for the whole year this year. But we had many events with our individual sponsors who did just help us with one specific event. So this is only a very short list of them. So I think we have over 40 different sponsors because we had 40 different events in the last 7 years. So these are some of the pictures from only these events, only in 2021. So these are all our events this year. And this year, it happened as we always working with university students and high school students, but earlier in the year from Motat, they came to me and I says, Mahsa, would it be possible to run a session for kids, little kids, that they're coming through Motat this year in April and just show them a little bit about technology. So with the help of our ambassadors, we put together a plug and play session, which was really just showing different devices, different technology from augmented reality, robotics, to a little bit of a coding within a couple of hours at Motat. And by doing that, we reached over 1,000 kids through this exhibition. I am more passionate than ever to smooth this path for our next generation. As a mom of a little 4 years old that you'll see her sitting here, I'll take her to every single event with me. And I really want her to see amazing women. They're doing great things here in New Zealand. Not only that, actually working with other kids and just showing them it's never too early and it's never too late to join this community and being part of it. So these are some of our events during 2020. So COVID didn't stop us. So like many other organizations, we adopt online events and we quickly turned to online. And as a result of that, actually, we had more events through lockdown than actually a year, because as you can imagine, organizing an online events with the speakers, it is easier than, finding a venue and having in person, but you can really, exchange the amount of energy you're actually getting from people in a room. So we have a hybrid version of our events to make it more accessible for people outside of Auckland. but we do have our in-person events. And one of the things we actually added to all our events this year, we live streaming every in-person events right now in Auckland. So last night, our events, it was in collaboration with AI Forum New Zealand, and that event is available publicly for everyone to our Facebook live streaming page, so they can also watch it later on. So these are some of the things that people said about us, and I just want to quickly, I'm mindful about time, you only have 5 minutes, so I just want to say that you probably heard that and you've seen that, but really, in order to tackle diversity, we have to all work together and we have to bring everyone in a room. Our events are not only for women, so it is really designed for everyone, because you can't really talk about diversity in a room full of women or identified women. So we want to have everyone as a part of this group, and together we're tackling a gender gap in technology. So Brene Brown, so she had this book that you've probably seen, that Dare to Lead. And one of the fascinating things that, one of the things I'm worried at the end of my work is that I want to work towards something which even seems impossible, but I want to say that at the end of my work, I will try and I'll work towards something to make a difference and making a change. So this is our motto, which she sharp as well. And finally, I just want to say that if you really want to be part of the group working towards a better work for our kids and our future generation, let's work together, break a stereotype, and support equality. So we are at SheSharp, we'd love to hear from you. And if your organization is in a position to host an event or provide speakers or simply coming to our events, we would love to see you there. So thank you so much, Josh. I hope I didn't change the timing so much. We have a few minutes for questions.
Are you kidding? No way. That was just outstanding, Mahsa. And thank you. You were an incredibly busy person. You've run from an examination centre to be with us this afternoon. And that's just been a ridiculously engaging presentation. I think you can count on certainly GAN's support in terms of those events. And, we've got some work, as you've heard from Nazrene there, with Microsoft at the moment, and women in STEM is a strategic focus for us too. So we're going to talk more. Sure. But let me just check that. Has anybody else got a question for Mahsa? Oh, Mahsa, I don't think we could see your slides there for about the last half. So just as far as that goes, we will ask our speakers to send the slides through. Yeah.
It's really bad. I wish I knew it. I didn't actually see the
sharing thing.
No. So you still can't see any of the slides?
I can't, but look, it could be me. But anyway, we'll make sure that the slides are made available.
Sure.
You can see that now, yeah.
Oh, sorry. So I don't know from where you didn't see it, but there was some information. I don't know if you saw any of the photos, but I'm definitely happy to provide you with the slides.
Thank you so much. If you're happy to share them, we'll make sure that they get circulated around. In fact, the presentations and the recording of the session will be on our resource centre for GAN NZ. And so, Mahsa, thank you so much. Anybody on the call got a question for Mahsa? I thought that was inspiring. Nope.
No.
Okay. Look, great. Thank you very much, and as I say, we'll be in touch.
Thank you so much.
Oh, a round of applause. Yeah, look, let's do that. Whoever's still here, please do, show your reaction. Thank you to Mahsa. I also want to thank Kelly and Angela from Trades Careers, Maretha from Diversity Works. She's had to leave for another meeting too. And finally, look, my thanks to you all for being on here. I am sorry that our Auckland office had a fire drill in the middle of it. That was a bit unfortunate. I think that happened the last time we had an event. But look, as I said at the beginning, you were at the first GAN Learning event. There will be more, but you were at the first one, and so that's superb. And I'm really glad that you all took the time, because it's a busy time of year. So I wish you all the best. Thank you for all of the excellent work that we've heard about today, all of the good initiatives and efforts of organisations that are about improving gender inclusion and equity, particularly where that comes to learning through work-based learning and apprenticeships, because that's what GAN's about. So, Megan.
Oh, No, I just wanted to say thank you, Josh, so much for facilitating today. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you. All right. Well, with that, perfect timing. Thanks, guys.
Josh. Thank you. Kia ora.
Kia ora. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful afternoon. Enjoy the rest of your week. We'll be in touch.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.